Greetings, everybody, for the second full week of 2026. First, before I talk about anything of substance, I have to apologize for the way that I've gotten behind on my videos. I really haven't modeled for y'all the severity of the situation that we're in right now over this past few weeks. Uh, Before it was because I had school, but I'm obviously out of school. Uh, I I ought to be uploading videos on two, potentially up to two times a week, on Saturdays, and whenever there's something that justifies some kind of immediate response. And I haven't been doing that. I'm two videos behind so far. So I have to apologize for the way that I haven't necessarily been modeling uh, the correct level of vigilance that we need to have. So this past week was certainly something different from the norm of headline filling just BS that has been coming out of Washington this past almost year now. This has been a very different week, much more like the week of when Kilmar Abrego Garcia was sent to SCOTUS. Uh, and that moment was a fundamentally un-American moment when the orders of a court were simply disobeyed. And this is a little bit more American. We've had experience with this kind of police violence directed against people, especially brown people, black people, for a long time. But it's still fairly unprecedented. The nature of a person who was just trying to leave, who had nothing, was not even involved in the stop, getting shot at. I suppose things like that have happened before, and Breonna Taylor, if I recall correctly, was murdered in her home. So this is pretty unprecedented, though. The race is also pretty rare. Well, we don't see as many of these killings that are directed towards white people. It's way out of proportion anyway. But so the victim herself was someone named Renee Nicole Good. She had children, and she was in a same-sex marriage, and she has been smeared actually quite a lot, as expected, about that in the right-wing press. That kind of stuff's above my pay grade. What I do know is that from the words that she said to that ICE officer, seem a lot like the last words of a lot of the Christian martyrs. So we don't know exactly what she believes, but I really would wish the best for her wherever she is now. And more importantly, for now, in terms of something that we have bearing and control over, or should try to help if we can, is the children who are now orphaned. They lost both of their parents because they had a biological parent. She used to be married to a man at one point, or in a partnership with a man. I don't know what ultimately happened. There was probably a lot of tragedy in that life already, from the looks of it. And I hope that there's peace now for her. but the children have no such peace, and they will be in they will suffer greatly because of what was done by these ICE officials. They're very similar to me, actually. I was not actually orphaned, but at different points, because of human actions, all of this was man made and preventable. I did lose both of my parents. Maybe someday I'll actually tell my story. I haven't felt the need to yet. There's been so much in the news and strategy that we need to do. But I was not a sweet summer child. And it's saying, so, when I do tell my story, you'll understand how much it means when I say that the day that Trump won the second time was one of the worst days, probably one of the 3 worst days of my life. That's saying a lot more than people might assume when you say words like that, and they just assume that you've had an easy life. I did not have an easy life, and neither did these children, and I see a lot of myself in them. I hope that they're safe. The statistics on the community that they're in would indicate that they very well might not be safe. But I hope that they're safe. I hope that we're all finding the family of this person, of Renee Nicole Good, and if you have money, if you're somebody that regularly donates and has a decent amount of money, that you're willing to donate some of your money to help keep that family as safe and as protected as possible and try to help them heal, which is obviously a Sisyphean task when you're talking about that much trauma, and not exactly. I don't know what the nature of the environment that they're in is, but I would presume that it might be quite hazardous, because there's a lot of people that do act as sexual deviants that happen to be, and that don't, in ways that we objectively know from the science, like promiscuity. There's a lot of that stuff in the LGBT community. Whatever you think of the community in theory, in practice, there's a lot of that stuff in it. And I hope that those children are safe. I really do. They remind me a lot of myself. And finally, about her being smeared over being in a same-sex relationship. The fundamental issue at the core of this shooting, I can't believe I'm already almost at 10 minutes and I've just talked about what's happened. But the fundamental issue at the core of that shooting is the issue of the shooter himself and the motives of a person who was probably not trained very well, possibly a former Proud Boy that has state access to state power, and we'll get to that in a second. At least the illusion of impunity, which is an illusion that will be fostered over the coming weeks. The idea that, and it's a miracle that it's even an illusion, but the idea that someone like that can just, for anybody, even white people, and this is dangerous for a lot of reasons, because it would make the kinds of things that would make fixing global warming impossible are definitely much more thinkable now than they would have been before this shooting. The kinds of things that would make it impossible for us to recover from global warming by robbing us of our intelligent people, Not to say that white people are more intelligent, but they've had more access to education. And as the skills that people have today, which are the ones that we're going to solve global warming with, they are concentrated among, yes, a lot of immigrant international students, which are already in severe danger. Uh, and I hope that they get to safety as much as possible. But also, American citizens that happen to be white as well have a lot of that knowledge because they've had more access to it. They haven't been as traumatized and they've had better access to schools and education. And so, creating that kind of precedent is very dangerous. That that it's not just black people that are poor, that are disadvantaged, that are vulnerable to this random terror, which should have never been allowed in the first place, but expanding it to anybody. And it's just so the idea of smearing these people because of the fact that she was in a same-sex relationship is so just, it's clearly an after the fact motivation. Tons of women drive around with other women in their cars. I'm sure you've all seen something like that in the past week. I did, with one of my own aunts was driven home by one of her unrelated friends. Tons of women spend time with each other. He had no way of knowing that that was a same-sex relationship that was going on. He had no way of knowing that. It's so clearly a retroactive justification for what he did, which again, we have the right to disagree with each other as Americans. That is un-American to murder someone because you disagree with them. And I've said myself that it's above my pay grade, the way that they lived. And I hope that everything's fine in terms of where she's going to be now. But that is that is completely un-American, and it's obviously un-Christian as well. And that's some of what is being used as scriptures to justify this kind of disgusting behavior. Anyway, so, but now we're going to get, so that's the personal aspect of it. And it's a very complicated and tragic thing, as it always is with people. People are rarely perfect. I don't think George Floyd had a perfect life, although the way that he was treated in the end was unacceptable, and we don't know anything about what he was trying to do. He may have been a little bit aggravated in a way that we all are, or he may have been committing a crime. Who knows? I really believe that the George Floyd thing was something that was paid the officer was paid by Russia to do that to whoever the next black person that he could find that might look guilty of something for whatever reason, to just do that in order to get paid by Russia. I really think that he did that for money. It just seemed like such a spectacle of cruelty. Now these people are a lot more empowered. This one was probably organic. What does it mean? Well, first of all, there's been a lot of rhetorical backing of these people by the right-wing media apparatus and by the people in power right now. There's been a lot of words. And then the second thing is that there's been stall tactics. Remember when I said the illusion of impunity? There have been stall tactics in such a way that to the untrained eye, and these ICE agents are clearly untrained. They don't understand the law. They don't understand how the law works. They feel like they've gotten away with it because the right-wing media apparatus is calling them heroes, and because because they've seen people receive meaningless pardons for state crimes, which is something that has happened in the last months. Go look up uh, Trump state pardon Hawk podcast, who's somebody I've really grown onto, just made a video a few weeks ago about Trump making this stupid fake pardon that he's not allowed to do because he has no jurisdiction over state crimes. He is this. Donald Trump has said a lot of words, and so they're gonna stall this. They're gonna have their investigation that they've already poisoned over the past couple of months, where they go out of their way to flatter him. All this flattery from the Department of Justice, and it's going to be a big nothing burger. And then there's going to be the state trial when that's done, when he's released and he's able to actually show up to court. There's going to be a real trial, and he is going to go to jail perhaps, because we do have a functioning state court system, and he is going to be beyond the reach of Trump's pardon, and that is a miracle. That is a miracle that we still have federalism in this country, and that because if I had been somebody, if I was playing a video game and I wanted to establish a dictatorship, after I went after the equal branches of government in terms of Congress and the Supreme Court, after I made sure that everybody there was physically afraid of me, and not just afraid for their careers or whatever, but physically afraid of me. What I would have done next if I was playing a video game again, all this stuff is unthinkable and awful, but what I would do is I would give big bread and circuses to the American people, and I would enact physical violence against the governments of blue states in order to grind them into submission and take away the autonomy of state governments. That's what I would do if I was trying to pull off an authoritarian takeover. And the bread and circuses would be the engine that makes it all function. Because, again, forget about being the old Republican Party in general. That's over anyway. Like, the day that you say that you want to be a dictator, you're just not a Republican in the old sense of the word anymore. As toxic as that was, you're not that. You're something different. And Donald Trump had no... He was good, actually, in his first term at doing bread and circuses. He did it for his farmer voters in Iowa during the trade war. He was good at bread and circuses. And I'm sure he would be if it wasn't for his dementia. Thank God that he's less able to distract and satiate the American people, who are not the brightest bulbs right now. I don't think anybody can be under any illusions about that. I think we would definitely have fallen for it if he was capable of creating the illusion. But he wasn't, and I'm very grateful. And that's really the fundamental fact of this, is that we have been flooded in grace. And so, but even then, they're going to try to stall. And it's going to create the illusion for a couple of months. It's going to be a dangerous couple of months that we have, where ICE who is not smart enough to understand that the state prosecutions will come for them at some point when they murder people and when they do false imprisonment ultimately and stuff like that. But the murder is where it starts. It's what galvanizes the states to actually finally take matters into their own hands, which is surprising that they haven't done it before. But they've given too much deference, I think, to the federal government in this whole process. But this is going to be a dangerous few months anyway. ICE is going to definitely feel like they have complete immunity for several months until it is proven that they don't. And if there is some kind of physical coup, then all bets are off. But they're probably, at this point, something like that is not likely in the near term, if it hasn't already happened. So, but during the interim, as these stalling tactics are applied, all of these ICE officers, who Trump sees as expendable anyway, he doesn't care. He didn't pardon the J6ers at the end of his first term, even though he was president for 13 days, because they failed. He's going to view these people the same way. He doesn't care about them. And so, but in the meantime, they're going to feel like he cares about them and like he actually has the power to save them, which he doesn't under the Constitution, and he doesn't unless he has some kind of rapid breakthrough of a physical breakthrough of power in which he's able to destroy federalism. If he doesn't do that, then he just doesn't have the power to save these people. But they're going to think that he does, and that's going to create an immense amount of danger. So, this is still an incredibly dangerous moment, as Heather Cox Richardson put it. She has said that between now and about May of this year, even after all of this grace that we've been swimming in, that has made it less likely with each passing week for a long time, or each passing month, not necessarily week, but less and less likely that these people are going to be able to actually pull it off. Even after all of this grace that we've been swimming in, it does ultimately come down to us. Do we take this seriously, or do we let our protest movement fizzle out? And this winter has already done a lot of damage to that. We have to make sure that we have to make sure that we hit the ground running again. We really have to make sure about that. I've been attending every indivisible meeting so far that's been available for me, as far as myself. There haven't been a lot of them recently because of Christmas and the New Year's, and they really have been sluggish. My group has been sluggish. They should not be sluggish. In any case, it's going to be up to us to decide, actually. If we let this year be a quieter year on our part than last year, because we're tired or whatever, or we've all found our coping mechanisms, like the bottle, or even worse things than that. I pray every day about the health of the person to whom those children are going to have to live, that they don't go down a path like that, because it's very easy for people in that community. They're surrounded by examples of addiction, both in terms of the sex itself and other stuff as well. They're surrounded by that. And so, but if we let this year be quieter than last year, then it's over. They are going to entrench their power in a way that is going to be quite difficult to ever recover from, and after 2029 or 2030, impossible, because of global warming. Logically impossible. And unless the CO2 were to magically disappear from the atmosphere, which, if you believe in the miracle, in other miracles, is nothing. In principle, I guess it could happen, but I don't. I don't want to think about that. I don't want to be in a position like that. But anyway, so this is a very dangerous moment. Now, it's a little less dangerous than it could be because we're going to have a normal midterm season. How do I know when it comes to redistricting? How do I know we're going to have a normal midterm season? Because the Supreme Court has declined to hear their case. This was the case that I brought up when I said that the elections very well might not mean anything. I brought this case up several months ago. Well, they decided to just slow roll this case and not give their answer. They probably want to give Republicans a massive advantage. They don't want to do it to this version of the Republican Party. And you know what? I totally understand them. I don't think that the Republican Party is redeemable as an institution. I think that we're just going to have to start from scratch with a different party system that is organized around different beliefs, frankly, on both sides. I don't think that this party system is really redeemable, but sorry. SCOTUS clearly does not want to empower the version of the Republican Party that exists now, which is why they want to put it off. They want to kick the can down the road another 2 years and maybe allow for that kind of redistricting to happen in 2028. First of all, we ought to have less Republicans in power at a state level to do that by 2028. And second of all, we ought to have a plan B still that is not just elections. But the urgency of that plan B is not as severe. We could actually wait until the elections themselves. I'm personally very impatient with the American people about this. I'm going to describe what we actually need to do. It's actually a lot less demanding than a general strike. Our normal lives could basically function more or less normal, unless, with the exception of intentional retaliation. We could live more or less normal lives, continue buying things, and going to the grocery store and getting food, and sending our kids to school, and using the fossil fuels that we need, unfortunately, to survive right now. Hopefully we won't need them for much longer. We could live fundamentally normal lives while we're doing the thing that we actually need to do. It's a lot less demanding than a true general strike. And I'm getting quite impatient with the American people about it. I really expected by this spring to have a general strike, but that's not realistic with the amount of funding that it would require to backstop the entire American economy through basically the equivalent of another COVID lockdown or worse. That's not something that I really think is realistic. But we don't have to do that because it's not about us, it's about the wealthy and the powerful. And I'm going to get to what we actually need to do. First, why do we need to do it, even if electoralism very well might work? One, because it might not work fast enough. The Supreme Court will eventually hear that voting rights case. They will probably rule the wrong way. The fact that they're waiting so long to rule means that they clearly want to empower Republicans. They just don't want to do it right now, because they think that that would be fatal to the Republic, which it would probably be fatal to the Republic. the thing is, it would be fatal to the Republic in 2020. It would be fatal to the Republic, period. I don't know if these people understand that global warming is real, or if they're supposedly denying it, or maybe they live in air conditioning so well that they can just ignore it. But whatever it is, I don't understand these Supreme Court people. I know that the rank and file Republicans, a lot of them believe in religious doctrines that are essentially just a religious veneer around wanting to end their lives, around the S word that I can't say because I don't want to get my video age restricted, although it might already be age restricted based on what I've already talked about. But I don't generally think that these Republicans at the top believe it. Maybe they think that they'll be invited to the billionaires' bunkers or something. I think they're too selfish to actually believe in the religious doctrines that their voters believe in. And even Mike Johnson, I believe that. I don't think he believes it. I think that he pretends to believe it. Maybe he does. I don't know. But anyway, if he does, then I actually have a little bit more pity for him, because he really must be in a lot of pain to believe doctrines like that it's better to just try to end the species now. That must be. I would actually have a little bit more compassion for Mike Johnson if I believed that he actually believed the things that he was saying. But anyway, he could always refuse to just swear people in. That's the other reason, is not just about timing, but also that Mike Johnson could say, fraud, and just pull in Adelita Grijalva and keep all of those people out of power, in spite of the fact that they rightfully won the elections, and just refuse to swear them in. And that is basically a coup d'etat. That is the end, or at least the suspension for now, of the Republic. And that is something that could happen. It's not guaranteed, but it could happen. They could try to do that, and we need to have a backup plan for that. So what is that backup plan? And I'm glad that I put a timestamp right in the name of the video to make it easy to get to, because I really want this to be more acceptable. I've been plugging this for the past several videos. Sorry about the notification sound, but I have been plugging this method for several months now, insofar as I've been making videos at all. And the method is that we have to organize. We have to organize and fundraise for a strike, a wildcat strike, obviously. This would not be a strike that would actually... This is a wildcat strike, not a union strike. But it's something that... And so it'll take some effort. What we have to do is we have to organize for a strike of the workers who provide services, food, transportation, entertainment, who provide all of this stuff for all of these services to the wealthy and the powerful. We need to deprive them of a normal life, of the life that they've grown to see as normal. And they could always use our services, but they don't want to, because they don't want... First of all, because they don't want to have a United H-Care thing to happen. And second of all, to happen to them. But second of all, because even if they did, a lot of these people, especially the powerful people, not so much the wealthy, a lot of these people, sorry about the shaky camera, a lot of these people are just too snobby to be willing to live the way that we live. And they would get mad about having to stoop to our level and not be waited on hand over foot. And eventually they would come to the negotiating table. This is how general strikes work in principle. We don't need to do the actual general strike. We don't need to do the self-deprivation. I don't think we're capable of it. I don't think that we have the energy or the level of sacrifice yet to do that. We're going to need a lot of therapy when this is done as a country. I don't think we're capable right now of that level of sacrifice. We'll need to be at some point to stop global warming. But it doesn't involve sacrifice on our part. It just involves a couple 100,000 people walking off the job, which is something that our existing fundraising mechanisms, it's orders of magnitude, multiple of them, smaller than a true general strike. 2 orders of magnitude smaller. Our existing fundraising infrastructure could pay for something like that. Our existing infrastructure could pay for something. We just need the imagination. And that's why I'm glad to be here on this channel to provide that imagination. And we are going to need to have this as a plan in our back pocket because there are dangerous times ahead. And we can't necessarily rely on the tools that we're used to as Americans of just voting people out. And when this is all done, we're going to need to have such a landslide that we can wipe this whole era away. That's the only way that we're going to survive global warming. That bit was a freebie. But anyway, we all need to be protesting right now. It's pretty warm in the eastern part of this country. And a couple of days ago was a great day to go out and protest. I actually, another example of me not modeling very well, I didn't go protest that day. I owed one of my friends a favor, and I did that favor for him. I did some house cleaning for him because he helped me with mine, and that was not. And I also saw my kids for Christmas, which is a worthy reason to not protest for late Christmas. They were sick. That's a worthy reason to not be protesting. But the second reason, not so much. I ought to be modeling better how we need to behave and the urgency we need to have. In any case, all of you that are protesting, I love you all, especially the ones where it's not as warm when you're doing it. You're just doing it because it's right. I love you all. My first protest was actually, the first protest this year was pretty cold in Metro West Boston. I love you, and I hope that you don't get hurt. I hope that nobody... And if you do, I hope that we're able to ultimately win in the end. And that your sacrifice is not in vain. God bless you all. And I will see you, hopefully, next week. Maybe sooner if something crazy happens again. Which is getting more likely. Take care.